Vault 4. Unlike any other vault, the dwellers of Vault 4 entered fully aware that an experiment would be conducted inside. The vault was openly advertised as being governed by a group of prominent scientists. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, when you hand over absolute power to a bunch of unsupervised researchers, the answer is everything. With no rules to rein them in, the scientists quickly turned Vault 4 into their personal playground of horrors. They began luring in unsuspecting wastelanders and subjected them to all sorts of twisted, unethical experiments. One of their most notorious creations is the Gulper, which is a monstrosity born from combining a radiation-resistant species with a human being. In one particularly gruesome case, a poor human gave birth to an entire school of Gulpers, only to be devoured by them shortly after. Eventually, these scientists met their downfall, as the dwellers rose up and overthrew the scientists. But for some of the unfortunate former test subjects, the damage was already done. Vault 11. Upon entering the vault, the citizens were informed that each year they had to choose one dweller to sacrifice. If they failed to comply, everyone would be killed. So for years, the dwellers used an election system to decide the unlucky winner, where one person would be chosen as overseer for a year, and then, as a reward for their service, sacrificed. Naturally, this turned the vault into a chaotic society ruled by factions and political blocs. And long story short, the chaos led to a full-blown war. In the end, only 5 survivors remained. With nothing left to lose, all 5 of them agreed to stop sacrificing anyone and reported their decision to the vault's computer, fully expecting to be vaporized on the spot. But instead, the computer congratulated them and revealed that everything they had gone through was just part of a social experiment. Vault 12. This vault was designed to test the effects of radiation on humans. It was marketed as one of the safest and most comfortable vaults around, but in reality, it was missing critical features, such as a properly functioning blast door and a radiation filter. Small things. But hey, at least they didn't lie about their shiny new vault water purification system, which proudly pumped out over 15,000 gallons of pure, refreshing drinking water every day. Gotta stay hydrated while you rot. With no real protection from radiation, the dwellers either died slow, painful deaths or lived long enough to become ghouls. Some managed to escape in search of a better home, while others stuck around and eventually founded the city of Necropolis. Interestingly, even after everyone was ghoulified, that trusty water pump remained a vital part of the vault and the city, guarded by the very people it outlived. Vault 15. The social experiment conducted here was somewhat more humane compared to other vaults, but this vault still managed to give birth to some of the most notorious raider gangs in the country, such as the Vipers, the Khans, and the Jackals. Basically, they carefully selected people from every kind of ideologies to live together. To make things even more interesting, they delayed the opening of the vault by several decades, forcing the dwellers to stay longer. The outcome of this experiment was pretty predictable. The living conditions worsened as the years went by. Schisms eventually formed, as people couldn't stand each other's opposing ideologies. Once the door was unsealed, the vault was quickly abandoned, leaving only a small number of people behind. Those with similar beliefs ended up grouping together. Vault 19. In this vault, dwellers were divided into 2 groups that lived separately from each other, the red sector and the blue sector. What set it apart from other vaults was the presence of not just 1, but 2 overseers, one for each sector. Acting under Vault Tech's orders, each overseer was instructed to subtly induce paranoia among their residents. We're talking subliminal messages, high-pitched noises, flickering lights, and random blasts of cold air. Due to the limited contact between the 2 groups, neither side knew what was truly going on and began blaming the strange occurrences on each other. The paranoia escalated to the point where even neutral parties like the Vault Doctor came under suspicion. Eventually, residents turned on their own faction members. The vault was eventually abandoned, and the fate of its dwellers remains unknown. Vault 21. Vault 21 might have been a dream come true for gambling addicts. Located in one of the biggest gambling cities in the world, aka Las Vegas, here, decisions were made through games of chance. Want the top bunk? Roll the dice. Think your department deserves more food rations? Time for a round of blackjack. From leadership disputes to chore assignments, everything came down to luck. The purpose of the experiment was to study the effects of excessive gambling. And while the setup was slightly bizarre, it surprisingly resulted in one of the most peaceful communities in the country. Eventually, the vault was turned into a hotel after Mr. House from Fallout New Vegas gained ownership of it. Vault 22. This vault was unique in that it wasn't actually marketed to civilians. Instead, it served as a private bunker for scientists tasked with developing a sustainable food source to solve world hunger after the Great War. Some of the experiments actually showed promising results at first, that is, until they introduced a new kind of fungus, and that's when things went downhill fast. This particular fungus was designed as a form of pest control, working by colonizing the host's body and killing the pest from the inside. Unfortunately, they soon discovered it could infect humans too. One by one, the researchers began to show symptoms. What started as mild fever and chills escalated into full-blown organ failure as the fungus spread and resisted all antifungal treatments. The remaining scientists tried to eliminate the infected by igniting gas, but it backfired, literally. The hosts only grew even more aggressive. Like many failed Vault experiments, this one ended in abandonment. Vault 29. Not much information is available about this vault, except that it was located on the West Coast and was inhabited by obnoxious children and teenagers from wealthy families. The purpose of the experiment remains unclear, but for some reason these minors were deliberately separated from all adults. Vault 31, Vault 32, Vault 33. These three vaults were interconnected in the hope that they could sustain and help each other, especially during a crisis. What the dwellers of 32 and 33 didn't know, however, was that 31 was special. It had better facilities and higher quality resources because it was intended to facilitate Vault-Tech's higher-ups, who would then be cryonically preserved. The objective was to brainwash the other two Vault's residents into being loyal to Vault-Tech so they could monopolize the wasteland after the Great War. Once the dwellers of Vault 32 discovered the secret, chaos ensued, and civil war broke out. While 33 remained oblivious to the deception and the chaos in 32, they faced their own internal conflict, which was made worse by a raid from a group of raiders. They still somehow managed to survive, though. Vault 34. This vault had two main features that made it unique. First, the residents were supplied with an excessive amount of firearms and ammunition. Second, it was intentionally designed to be overpopulated, with each person given little to no personal living space, although Vault-Tech generously compensated for this with flashy public amenities, such as a swimming pool. Eventually, a group of residents began pressuring the overseer to grant them access to the armory. When their request was denied, they rioted, and things quickly spiraled out of control as they attempted to overthrow him. The chaos caused severe damage to the vault's infrastructure, which led to a radiation leak. To make matters worse, the blast door broke, trapping everyone inside. In the end, most of the dwellers were transformed into ghouls due to the radiation. Vault 51. Vault 51 didn't come with a designated overseer like other vaults. Instead, it was monitored by an AI named ZAX and his human assistant, Robert Baker. ZAX had one mission: to determine the perfect overseer. At first, it ran several rounds of good old-fashioned American-style elections, but each attempt failed miserably and only stirred up tension between factions. Baker then suggested they find someone who could step up in times of crisis. Being the robot that it was, ZAX took that way too literally and began orchestrating actual crises for the dwellers to solve. The problems were low-key absurd. For example, ZAX forced the upper class to move into the least comfortable quarters. In another instance, it made residents compete for access to better living spaces, like a dystopian game show. Needless to say, these manufactured conflicts backfired spectacularly. Tensions kept escalating until things got completely out of hand, and the residents started killing each other. In the end, no one survived, except the one true leader, the robot itself. Vault 68, Vault 69. These two vaults were designed as twisted social experiments that mirrored each other in the most extreme way. Vault 68 was filled with 1,000 men and only a single woman, while Vault 69 flipped the scenario, housing 1,000 women and just one man. There's no official record about the outcome of the experiments, so one can only imagine the chaos, drama, and possibly a whole lot of therapy that would have been needed. Vault 75. This vault was specifically designed to house the students of Malden Middle School. Not only were their parents separated from them, but the parents were also executed. Once the students turned 18, they were sorted. Those with high intelligence and strong physical condition were tricked into being harvested for their superior genes, though God knows what was harvested. Those who weren't physically exceptional but still had good intelligence were turned into the vault scientists. If they had neither quality, they were executed. The so-called perfect genes were used to breed what Vault-Tech considered the perfect babies. It was said that at some point, the junior students and the graduates teamed up to stage a rebellion. In the end, the vault was taken over by the Gunners, with no original inhabitants left. Vault 77. Out of all the experiments, this one is on the sadder side. In this vault, a single man was locked inside with no one for company except a crate of puppets. Eventually, the overwhelming loneliness began to affect his mind, and at some point, he started hallucinating, believing that the dolls around him were alive. At the height of his delusion, he destroyed a king puppet and blamed the act on the Vault Boy doll, who in his mind, had also convinced him that he was the one who killed it. The man eventually escaped from the vault, taking the Vault Boy doll with him. Vault 81. Vault-Tech had the idea to create a cure for all kinds of diseases, so they built Vault 81 to conduct experiments on the residents for that purpose. Naturally, the dwellers were completely unaware. The only non-scientist who knew about the plan was Overseer Olivet. Determined not to let it happen, She took action by sabotaging the call list to prevent the scientists from showing up and sealing off the ones who did manage to show up. Thanks to her efforts, Vault 81 became one of the few vaults that remain fully functional to this day. Vault 87. The vault's purpose was to study the effects of the forced evolutionary virus, or FEV, on human test subjects. This wildly unethical decision would eventually lead to the creation of the first generation of the infamous supermutants. The scientists began infecting both male and female subjects with the FEV, but it didn't take long before things went sideways. The experiments had to be shut down due to severe side effects in the subjects, including extreme mental changes. And then once the test subjects mutated, they broke out of the facility. From there, they did what super mutants do best: roam the wasteland and make everyone's lives a nightmare. Vault 88. Technically, this vault was built as a site for experimentation, but instead of the usual gruesome or unhinged experiments involving humans or strange organisms, this one was meant to test out bizarre gadgets. However, the construction of the vault was never completed. When the sole survivor eventually stumbled upon the site, the already ghoulified overseer offered them a mission to help finish what Vault-Tec started and complete the gadgets. Vault 92. This vault was primarily marketed to musicians. They were promised state-of-the-art musical equipment and advanced technology to preserve their musical legacy. It might sound like a dream to them, but then again, it's Vault-Tec, so you just know there's a twist. Turns out these poor musicians were unknowingly enrolled in the white noise mind suggestion combat experimentation. Residents were placed individually in sound booths and subjected to ultra-low frequency white noise. The noise would also be broadcast throughout the vault inside the recording studios. At a glance, it seemed fairly harmless, but the experiment quickly spiraled out of control. One resident went insane and killed 3 others, triggering a wave of madness. Soon they all began turning on each other. In the end, the chaos led to the vault's downfall, and the place was eventually overrun by mutated creatures. Vault 94. Vault 94 looked like a true safe haven. It was well stocked with food sources, making it fully self-sustaining. There was only one rule in this vault: anyone seeking entry had to be fully committed to non-violence. Because of this unique requirement, most of the residents were peaceful, religious farmers. The first year inside the vault went flawlessly. It almost felt like a utopia. But things took a turn after the vault door was opened, and a vault ambassador decided to invite some wastelanders to move in. These newcomers thought the place was way too good to be true because, clearly, in a world full of radiation, guns, raiders, and mutants, kindness had to be a trap, right? Their paranoia escalated, and the group eventually massacred the Vault Council and seized control of the GECK, which ultimately led to a nuclear explosion, which then led to mass mutations around the area. Vault 95. Originally, the vault acted as a rehabilitation center for chem addicts, and for the first 5 years, everything went surprisingly well. Most of the residents managed to recover from their addictions, but then things took a nosedive. A Vault-Tec agent, secretly planted among the residents, stirred the pot and revealed the location of a hidden, abundant chem stash. And just like that, the piece they had worked so hard to build went up in smoke. Chaos broke out, violence erupted, and many of the former addicts relapsed almost instantly. Vault 96. The idea behind the creation of this vault was to place 5 brilliant scientists inside to preserve wildlife and eventually release them back to the mainland. But of course, there was a twist. After the vault was sealed, the scientists were informed that, in addition to their main objective, they were also required to induce mutations in the wildlife. To make matters worse, each scientist was given a quota. If they failed to meet their goals or got left behind, they would be punished by the Vault-Tec computer. And by punished, we mean executed. Eventually, the scientists had had enough. They devised a plan to escape by installing a virus into the computer. But still, the computer got the last laugh. Before they could flee, it released a cloud of poison gas, killing them all. As a final bonus horror, the mutated wildlife escaped and began roaming the area. Vault 101. Vault-Tec said, "What if we assign an overseer to a vault, but never open the vault, and just give them total control?" And that's exactly what happened with Vault 101. Its main purpose was to observe what an overseer would do when trapped indefinitely in a vault with absolute authority. In the early years, overseers would play it safe and do their job by the book. The residents lived by the mantra, "We are born in the vault, we live in the vault, and we die in the vault." But eventually, one overseer got a little too curious, and from then on, a few residents began slipping out of the vault one by one, with one of them being the Lone Wanderer, our protagonist in Fallout 3. The rest is history. Vault 106. 10 days after dwellers entered the vault, psychoactive drugs began to be released via the air filtration systems without their knowledge. As time went by, many experienced deterioration in their mental states. They began to hallucinate and showed aggressive behavior. Interestingly, a small percentage reported that they felt relaxed. Eventually, those who were unaffected got evacuated. But the gas didn't stop being released even after centuries. Vault 108. The dwellers of Vault 108 just couldn't catch a break. Problems kept piling up. For starters, their first overseer had a terminal illness and died within a few months. 20 years after the vault was sealed, their power supply was cut off. And for some reason, they were provided with an armory 3 times larger than the standard issue. Entertainment? Forget about it. This vault was basically designed to be the worst possible living situation. Not to mention, there was also a completely out-of-place cloning device used for strange experiments. It ended up creating a total of 54 clones of one poor guy named Gary. All of them were hostile to anyone who wasn't, well, Gary. One can only imagine the horror of living in this vault. Vault 111. The dwellers were kept in cryogenic pods without their prior knowledge about the experiment. The purpose was to study heat effects of long-term cryogenic stasis. Originally, they were supposed to stay frozen for only 180 days, assuming Vault-Tec gave the all-clear signal. But that signal never came, and the Overseer, along with the scientists and staff, were left in limbo. The Overseer also refused to open the vault door due to paranoia about the radiation outside. Some of the staff grew tired and decided to overthrow the Overseer. But the Overseer retaliated by placing the vault on full lockdown. Eventually, everyone in the pod died of asphyxiation because nobody was left to maintain their life support systems. Everyone except the sole survivor, the protagonist of Fallout 4. Vault 112. Inside Vault 112, dwellers were kept in pods equipped with neural interfaces and life support systems, allowing them to live in virtual reality for as long as possible. This means they were free to experience utopias inside their minds for hundreds of years. It could have been heaven, but little did they know. Their overseer, Dr. Braun, had full control over their virtual worlds, and a few screws loose. Driven by his own madness, Dr. Braun twisted their perfect realities into nightmares. He'd destroy their lives, kill them, wipe their memories, and force them to relive the torment over and over again, until the lone wanderer came along to interrupt. Vault 114. The idea behind the experiment in this Vault 114 was to strip the upper class of their luxury and force them to live in conditions far below what they were used to. Just to spice things up, Vault-Tec appointed someone wildly unqualified with zero leadership skills as the overseer, just to see how the wealthy would react when everything went sideways. However, the vault was never actually finished, and the experiment remained just an idea. Vault 118. In stark contrast to Vault 114, Vault 118 was designed to pamper the ultra-rich. 10 of them would be given the full luxury treatment. Meanwhile, around 300 other regular residents were expected to live in far less glamorous conditions. The goal was to observe how the two vastly different groups would interact. Unfortunately, or fortunately, this vault also met the same fate as Vault 114. Construction was never completed due to embezzlement.